I want to remind everybody that today's town hall meeting is being recorded and will be placed on YouTube later today or tomorrow. The clock's going to strike 4 and we will begin. Okay, welcome to the Sunriver Owners Association Town Hall. Today, the panel is going to be discussing the results from the Sunriver Owners Survey, the top 5 projects for infrastructure and amenities. And I'm going to turn it over to SROA. Oh, if you have questions while they're talking, go ahead and type them in the chat. I will keep track of all the questions. And at the end of their presentation, I will ask your questions to the panel. Thank you very much for joining us today.
I guess I'll jump in. I'm James Lewis. I'm the general manager for SROA. I'm going to be one of the presenters today. We have 2 board members and another director for our public works department. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Bill.
I'm Bill Burke. I'm a board member and I was a member of the IAMP task force as well.
Mark Smith, Public Works Director, also a member of the IAMP task force, along with some of the other iterations of the process.
And I'm Gerhard Bienen. I am a SROA board member and your treasurer, and I am also head of the Telecommunications Task Force, which I will be talking about later today.
And this is James again. I guess the first thing is you've heard the acronym 3 times now, IAMP, and you're probably wondering, what is IAMP, some of you? IAMP, the acronym IAMP, stands for the Infrastructure and Amenities Master Plan. And that's essentially looking at roads, streets, things like that, and then a lot of our recreational amenities. And there was a study done, completed in early mid 2020. And so we'll be referring to that today, but we're also going to be referring to the Comprehensive Owners Survey that was conducted last year, because that's where we're really addressing today the top 5 infrastructure and amenities items that came from the Comprehensive Owners Survey. But there's a lot of overlap with the specific plan that was approved 2 years ago. So with that, we're going to do a screen share here. Yeah. So we're at our town hall. Let's go to the next slide. And so what you're looking at, these 4 slides, the next 4 slides are directly from our infrastructure and amenities master plan that was approved by our board of directors in mid 2020. And what these reflect right here, that work included 2 primary components. One, there was a survey that was conducted of owners to see, what are your top infrastructure and amenities master plan concerns and items. But then there was also a task force, and what that task force did is they took that information, but they also had their own grading scale, and a lot of discussion among that task force to look at other issues such as costs and timing and how it relates to other factors. And I think Bill's going to talk about that when I'm done providing some basic information. But what you see right here, this came straight from the report. This is the result of the task force and what was adopted by our board. And what you can see is the top 6 items. Recycling center improvements were number 1 concern on infrastructure. Public works facilities was number 2. Telecommunication infrastructure number 3. Then we had restrooms at parks and pathways, our SROA administration facilities, and then the Cottonwood Road entrance. Go to the next. And then as far as amenities, again, these are some of the recreation items, park items. The number 1 issue was Sunriver Pathways. Number 2 was Fort Rock Park. Number 3 was Mary McCallum Park. Number 4, Tennis Hill and pickleball facilities. Number 5, North Tennis Center facilities. And then 6 and 7 were the Cottonwood Regional Park and Meadow Village Regional Park. Okay, now this may be hard to see on your screen, and you can study it more when you replay this over and over because we're recording this. And what you can see is These were the actual results of the survey that was conducted as part of that IAMP report. So again, what you previously looked at was the final scoring grading of the task force and what was adopted by the board. But these were the specific items that ranked from highest to lower as part of the survey that was conducted. And again, we had for infrastructure, telecommunications was high, public works facilities, new recycling center, restrooms, Sunriver Service District, police fire facility was on there, Cottonwood Road entrance, and administrative facilities for SROA. So there's a lot of overlap, in the order here as what came out of the final report. And then here's the amenity items. Again, Sunriver Pathways, Fort Rock Park, Mary McCallum Park, a dog park was mentioned, it was high, Cottonwood Regional Park, Tennis Hill facilities, North Tennis Center facilities, and Meadow Village Regional Park facilities. So I guess what I can say is as we go through the remainder of our presentation today, what you will see is that of these items that were identified in the IAMP process, some of these projects are underway. Some of these will be talked about as part of another planning process we're going through this year, and some of those may begin construction this year. Some of them may be in subsequent years. But I think that, what you can see, all of our planning is subject to cost and budgeting. So that always factors into what our board moves forward. But I think one of the most important items that you'll see as we go through our presentation today is that when you look at the priorities that we heard from the owners and you look at the priorities that came from the task force, we really do listen to the owners, and we're moving those projects forward based on your concerns. Now, more specifically, Bill, I didn't want to steal any thunder there, but about the IAMP process itself, if you want to discuss that.
Yeah, I'll go provide some background information for everybody that's tuning in. This isn't the first IAMP. One occurred in 2012. Both are considered to be living documents and are considered to be conceptual in nature. That is to say, it's not necessarily a blueprint for what should or will happen in any particular order or on any specific timetable. Some tangible results of the 2012 IAMP, for example, include the boat ramp in 2015, reconstruction of pathways, all 34 miles in 2016, and the replacement of the North Pool, the members pool, just last year. When the board created the 2020 task force, it was to be comprised of 12 to 13 owners and staff members. We were charged with reviewing the 2012 IAMP, conducting a new survey of owners, reviewing past comprehensive owners surveys, researching trends, and prioritizing all results and submitting recommendations to the board. The task force membership included a combination of homeowners, full-time owners who have a second home here, and owners who rent their homes. The group was oriented towards the common good in line with the SROA mission. Probably all of us homeowners involved entered with thoughts on what we thought was the right thing, but everybody listened well. Everybody had a chance to hear their voices heard, and many things could be cleared up as doable or not doable based on something like land use restrictions. Everybody worked well together. Everybody seemed pleased with the process and the development of our grading elements, which included 12, one of which was the survey. And many members have described it as one of the best professional experiences that they've had in terms of outcome. I think it would probably be going too far to go into all of the grading elements, but those are available on the published task force report on the SROA website.
No, I think that's good. I think, the biggest things that I took away, because that was being completed right when I started here, was the quality of the task force, the collaborative effort, the agreement and free talk among the task force members to come up with a document that was truly reflective of Sunriver as a whole. So I think it's great, and it really should be pointed out to everyone listening, to all the owners, that it was a big listening session and trying to move forward what the community wants.
Yeah.
So and again, we can get questions on more of this as we go. Next one. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gerhard Bienen to talk about telecommunications.
All right, thank you, James. Next slide, please. All right, the Telecommunication Task Force has been working for the past 3 years, focused on finding a new solution for telecommunications in Sunriver. And this has really been driven by 2 factors. One factor is that, as James mentioned earlier, telecommunications infrastructure has been selected as a top priority on several of the past owners survey. And shown in the table here on the right is the 2020 IAMP survey results. These are the raw results before the grading was applied by the task force team. And you can see that 64% of survey respondents placed telecommunications infrastructure as their one of their top 3 priorities, with 51% placing it as their top priority. I think the second thing that is driving our work on telecommunications is our contract with Ben Broadband. In 2012, SROA entered into a 10-year contract with Ben Broadband. That contract comes due here at the end of June. There is a possibility for a 5-year extension, which Ben Broadband has already applied for, but SROA really needs to decide if beyond the end of this contract, are we going to continue to work with Ben Broadband, or are we going to take a different path? Back to the previous slide, please. Okay, in terms of the task force members, you can see there are a number of people from the SROA management team. We have 2 members of the SROA board, President Mobley and myself. We have 5 at-large Sunriver owners, and we have a representative from Sunriver Resort. We're particularly lucky in that 2 of the at-large owners, John Salzer and Dick Lupke, were both involved in the negotiations with Ben Broadband back in 2010. So they bring a lot of that experience to the task force. In addition, I think there's a tremendous amount of telecommunications expertise on the task force. For example, President Mobley was involved in bringing fiber optic networks to communities in Wasco County, including the city of Maupin. Myself, John Salzer, and Dick Lupke have worked in the telecommunication industry for most of our professional careers. Doug Palin operates a telecommunication network in Portland today. Brian Katanami is in charge of telecommunications for the Sunriver Resort, and Brad Olson has been in charge of SROA information technology for the past 13 years. So we have quite a bit of experience on the team. So next slide, please. So one of the things I want to kind of set the stage is that the Telecommunication Task Force quickly settled on what we believe is the best solution for Sunriver, and that is a fiber to the home infrastructure upgrade. And there are a lot of reasons that the task force believes fiber to the home is the best solution for Sunriver. Fiber has longevity. That is, once it's in place, it will serve the community's needs for over 50 years. Fiber to the home is not subject to electrical interference, and therefore eliminates many of the problems Sunriver owners have experienced with our current network. Fiber to the home has nearly infinite bandwidth, and so that not only will it meet the needs of Sunriver owners today in terms of high-speed upload and download, but it will also be able to meet our needs 50 years from now, even if our needs back then exceed 10 gigabits per second. And so there's a tremendous amount of capability with fiber, and once it's in place, it can really add a lot of value to Sunriver. It's also much more reliable than our current hybrid fiber coax network. So reliable that Ben Broadband is willing to guarantee 99.9% uptime. They do not provide any kind of guarantee of uptime on their existing network. So this is a big improvement for us. Now, several people have brought to our attention, some of the significant advances that have been made in wireless technology. And certainly over the past 20 years, wireless technologies have made significant increases. However, even despite those increases, they can't compete with fiber, particularly in a highly treed environment. And so the trees in Sunriver, and we've got lots of them, as I'm sure all of you know, are detrimental to the transmission of wireless signals. So next slide, please. Okay, the task force has identified two different, significantly different options for delivering fiber to the home to Sunriver. One is we can continue with Ben Broadband, or two, we can build our own fiber to the home network, essentially a community-owned network. These two options can be both kind of broadly classified as either a lease option or a buy option. In that the lease option case, Ben Broadband would own and operate the network. In the buy option case, SROA would own the network and would contract with service providers to operate the network. Either option represents a significant improvement in our current telecommunications network. So independent of which way we decide to go, we are going to see a major improvement in telecommunications in Sunriver with either of these options. Okay, next slide, please. Let's take a closer look at what Ben Broadband is offering. And they actually have two different options available. The first one is a 15-year standard services agreement. And this is comparable to what we have in place today, with the one major exception, and that is that Ben Broadband or their parent company, TDS, will build out a fiber to the home network in Sunriver. Service offerings will be similar to what Ben Broadband is offering today. Service pricing will remain similar to what you pay today. And what Ben Broadband has been willing to put into the contract is they will maintain prices for Sunriver that are comparable to what Ben customers pay. And so that's kind of what they call their standard services agreement. It would be a 15-year contract. And during this 15-year period, other telecommunication providers can provide services in Sunriver, but SROA as an organization would be prohibited from promoting any other telecommunication offering with the exception of Ben Broadband. The second type of agreement that Ben Broadband is willing to offer is what they call a bulk agreement. And in a bulk agreement, effectively what Sunriver offers to Ben Broadband is that all homes and businesses in Sunriver will be served by Ben Broadband TDS, okay? And each of those homes will subscribe to a basic internet service. Basic internet service is defined as 300 megabits upload and download speed, which is a significant improvement over what you would normally be using today. And the cost for that service would be fixed at $32 a month per homeowner for the duration of the contract. And so in this situation, essentially what happens is that SROA becomes a major customer to Ben Broadband, and the SROA owners get their service, their internet service, as part of their normal annual maintenance agreement. And so it's comparable to just like, the pathways are part of our maintenance agreement, and, a lot of our recreation facilities are brought to you or made available to you by part of our maintenance agreement. This, if we go down the road of a bulk contract, then basic telecommunication service, as defined as 300 megabits upload and download speed, fiber to your home, would become a basic service available to all Sunriver owners. And again, to pay for this, Sunriver SROA would increase the maintenance fees to cover the cost. And so all owners would subscribe. They would end up paying that through to SROA. SROA would be the customer of Ben Broadband. Now, as an individual homeowner, you can still go to Ben Broadband and you can say, well, I don't want 300 megabits, I want 1 gigabit. Or you could say, in addition to my 300 megabits of internet service, I want TV service or I want phone service. And you would contract directly with Ben Broadband for those additional services. Alternatively, you could say, well, you know, I really don't want to have that service from Ben Broadband. I'd rather get my TV service from something like YouTube TV or Roku or something like that. That is contract for that service by an internet offering, and that would also be allowed. And so you would have choices beyond the basic internet service as to how you would, what your telecommunication services would look like. One of the advantages of having a bulk agreement like this is not only the significant discount in terms of the cost of the internet service, but also because SROA would become a major customer to Ben Broadband. And so if there are issues in Sunriver, then SROA can sit down at the table with Ben Broadband and act as your advocate. And, you know, with SROA paying Ben Broadband on the order of about $130,000 a month in fees, I think they will listen very closely to what Sunriver, what SROA has to say. All right, so let's take a closer look then at what a community-owned fiber to the home network would look like. Next slide, please. Okay, Sunriver could build its own fiber to the home network. We've sent out an RFP, we've gotten responses to that RFP, and we have a pretty good idea of how much that's going to cost. It costs about $20 million to construct a fiber to the home network in Sunriver. All right. Once we own the network, you know, then we can do with it whatever we want. Owners would need to pay for that construction cost using a process similar to what was used for Sharp. That is, they might have a one-time payment of approximately $4,800 or 15 annual payments at approximately $400 a year or 180 monthly payments at approximately $33 a month. You would be paying for the network up front, and then after a period of about 15 years, Sunriver owners would completely own that network. It would be completely paid off, and we would now own that network, and we could do, and again, we can do whatever we want with that network. Effectively, SROA would contract with different internet service providers. The internet service, they would provide an internet connection service. Owners could choose their video and voice communication providers from the internet offerings, you know, either directly from an internet service provider that is on our network, or for something like, you know, YouTube TV or Roku or any of those other current offerings that are available on the internet. One of the ISPs would be contracted to provide maintenance services on the for the network. And so SROA would not be directly responsible for the maintenance of the network, but actually contract that out. And it is, you know, based on conversations we've had with potential ISPs, we estimate that internet service would cost on the order of about $35 a month. And that might be a service as high as 1 gigabit per second upload and download speeds. And I just want to point out, you know, they've got these little icons or logos on the right-hand side. A number of Oregon communities have gone forward and done this. They have implemented this model. Communities like Sandy, Maupin, Monmouth, and Independence, Oregon, all have built and now manage their own fiber to the home networks. And so this is a model that has been used in other communities. It's been used in resort communities. It's been used in normal cities and towns. And so we'd be following a model similar to what these communities have done. All right, next slide, please. So this matrix is kind of summing up the opportunities. And you can see here we have some of the key features of each of the fiber to the home solutions we are currently pursuing. We have two options offered by Ben Broadband, the BBB standard and the BBB bulk. And then we have the Sunriver own network. And you can look at the various different categories and the differences between them. One is that if you have a Sunriver owned network, it is open, versus if it's Ben Broadband, it's a proprietary network. We talked about the buy or lease type terminology. We can either continue with Ben Broadband or we can chart our own path. Standard services agreement. So if with Ben Broadband, we have two different options, a standard service agreement or a bulk agreement. And you know, you can look at it and says, you know, if we continue with Ben Broadband, you have have a one-stop solution available versus in the Sunriver owned network, it would become more of a, you know, you'd be able to pick from multiple suppliers. So that kind of gives a real quick summary of the differences between the various different options that we're looking at today. Okay, next slide, please. Additional information. I just want to make sure that you're aware that the Sunriver Owners Association, mostly with the help of Keith Caceres and Susan Berger, have put together a telecommunications section on the SROA website. So if you go to sunriverowners.org website, you can go find the telecommunications section. And this on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see the top page. There's a lot of information there. We got some recent recordings of town hall meetings that we held. We've got, you know, where we had representatives from Ben Broadband, TDS, as well as representatives of community-owned fiber to the home networks, talk about what they see for Sunriver. There are some frequently asked questions. There have been a series of Sunriver Scene articles that you can look at there. We've got a kind of a pros and cons section of the different options, and we intend to regularly update this with new information as it becomes available. And then on my final slide here, what comes next? The Telecommunications Task Force will be following up with an owner's survey. This survey will help the task force make our recommendations to the SROA Board of Directors. And then if the Board of Directors decides that to put this issue to a vote of the owners, that would take place in the August timeframe when we have our normal annual voting for board members. So that's something that's coming up. Again, we're looking forward to getting as much feedback as we can from the owner's survey that we will be sending out in the next several weeks. And again, we'll be compiling that information and then presenting it to the SROA Board of Directors with the Telecommunications Task Force recommendation. All right, that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerhard. I'm going to jump into our third topic today and asking you all to read. We don't have any slides for this one, so you're going to have to look at us here on the screen. But if you remember back just in the introduction here, short time ago, we provided those top amenity items. And what was included in there, we had regional park, we had a dog park, we had improvements at Fort Rock Park, we had tennis and pickleball facilities, we had restrooms. Some of those items have not been, no work has begun yet. And part of the reason being is, well, we have other projects that are going on, so it's not as if we're not moving forward with those things that came from previous IAMP reports. But as a staff and in working with our board, what we figured out is, and some of the questions that kept coming up, do you do a regional park first? Do you do improvements to Fort Rock Park first? Do you do a dog park? And depending on who you talk to, all of those items, they all come with a cost. They all come with, well, you know, individuals in our community have preference of what they want to see done first. But when you start balancing those desires with budgetary constraints and where you get your biggest bang for your buck to serve the community, to serve the owners, there was a lot of difference in the discussion. So what we talked about is what's done in a lot of communities is you do a parks master plan. And what the Parks Master Plan will do is it will consider all of those items I just talked about and more. And it's done as a comprehensive view of all park and recreation amenities in Sunriver as they are interrelated. You may only go to one park, but you get there via the pathways and you may play tennis, pickleball on the way. You know, all of our amenities, our recreation amenities, our park and recreation amenities are interrelated. So rather than doing piecemeal development, piecemeal improvements, what we're going to do is provide a coordinated, cost-effective way of planning and constructing these projects. Again, so we get a prioritized list based upon our budgetary and financial ability to do these, but also that meets the prioritization as determined by the community. So again, what this does, what the Parks Master Plan does, it's designed to address long-range plans, as well as immediate needs. There's some things we know that we might, need sooner. We need to be constructing this year, next year. There's some things that we know we aspire to in Sunriver, the owners want, but it's something that might be a bigger item that can happen at a later date. So again, what the document will end up doing is it will have goals, and those goals are what do we want to achieve and how are we going to achieve those goals, kind of those overarching aspirational goals. It will also have strategies to get there. We need to do budgetary exploration, for example. We need to look at environmental impacts. Those are the strategies to get there. And then there's action items that will come out of this as well. And the action items are specific tasks to move forward toward whatever project it may be. And those may be everything from, seek a loan, seek permits through the applicable permitting agency. And so it's going to be very active in immediately upon going to our board and being adopted, it's going to be put into motion. It will have direction for us as staff, for board members, community members, all to move forward. So ultimately, what else this will do, it will look at factors such as for each one of these amenities, the master plan will look at factors such as impacts to the land itself, neighbors, there's noise, dust, there's parking, costs, and ultimately, like I said, all of those will be coordinated so we can get the biggest bang for our buck as in a quick and logical fashion. The process for the Parks Master Plan itself will include a consultant in the 2022 budget. Our board put money in there to hire a consultant. We'll go to an RFP process in not too distant future. Just next week, I'll be meeting with Mark Smith, who you're going to hear from in a little bit, Leanne Dennis, our recreation director, and some other staff to put together a scope of work. This scope of work will be built into a request for proposal, and we will put it out and hopefully get a consultant that is skilled in Parks Master Planning. There are a bunch of them out there in Oregon to come in and assist us and put this plan together. Ultimately, as part of this planning process, we will have a task force, just like we talked, we had an IAMP task force, and Gerhard was just talking about the telecommunications task force. The key to having the task force is to make sure that we get balanced and broad input in the project. So we will have, again, owners, we like to have resident owners, absentee owners, there will be staff, there will be board members, and any other, I guess profession's not the right word, but any other input that we may need. We may need the help of landscape architects, for example, to help us through this planning project. But ultimately, with the work of that task force and the work of the consultant, the goal is we work through, as we get into the fall of this year, that we have a document that's ready for public review. We'll put it out there for the public to review and comment on, get those comments, take those into consideration, make changes to the Parks Master Plan where appropriate, then ultimately take it to our board for consideration. And when our board approves it or adopts it, those are kind of our marching orders for how and what we are going to move forward for amenities over the next few years. And again, that will also guide our budgetary concerns. When we work in the fall with our board to allot dollars for capital projects, this will help us guide our dollars in a logical fashion. So, and it's more than likely, speaking of surveys, that as part of the Parks Master Plan, that we will conduct another owner's survey. Because, we have a considerable amount of turnover of owners of properties. And so it's important to get that up to the minute, up to date input as ownership changes in Sunriver. So again, one of the big issues that will be included in this is the dog park. We hear a lot about a dog park. But the question is, where's the right place to put it? Everyone wants one, but nobody wants it next to their house. Are there parking concerns? So those elements become very difficult. So we're going to fold that into the parks master planning. And I'm calling that out specifically because we hear a lot about the dog park, lots of dog owners in Sunriver. So again, that's something that will be folded into the park master plan. And I'm going to stop there because like I said, we don't have any slides. There's really nothing to show you, but it's really, look for the SROA webpage to discuss this and have a specific portion of that webpage when this project kicks off. We will also be soliciting for task force members. So if you have an interest in this, stay tuned and you will hear from us. So with that, the next issue, turning it over to Mark Smith, our Public Works Director.
That's a great segue from the Parks Master Plan. Parks Master Plan definitely supports and has almost like that Olmsted theory of a string of pearls. And then you have a place like McCallum that is completely different from what we see for usage within Sunriver. An example would be it's deed restricted. So what the property is right now and what it was 5 years or 7 years ago is different. It's almost doubled in size during that time with the land trade that happened. So part of it is deed restricted for owners only, and the other part could be open to other folks if need be. We've had a few planning processes that have taken a look at it, and McCallum almost always seems to be a catch-all for everything. So whenever somebody has an idea of where they want to put something, whether it be a community garden or a dog park, it seems like McCallum kind of is that. But when we see the survey results back from what people want at McCallum, they really want that intrinsic quality of what Sunriver is and that natural environment feel instead of it just being completely full and plugged. There has been a handful of things that have happened out there at McCallum, and those include like the gates that are out there. There's new pads and picnic tables. There's part of a pathway that was constructed that's ADA accessible and gives good access to the river. And then the board has approved this this year, 2022, to have a pavilion and bathroom that are out there. But that may take some changes as we take a look at it. We're have the same constraints that everybody else does with contractors and increasing budgets, but that is a goal that we have this next year. I believe that's what we have addressed with McCallum at this point.
An additional pathway.
That's true. The additional pathway. So there's a pathway that's about 0.66 miles. So and it goes around a certain section. McCallum has quite a bit of limitations. It has some wetland areas. It's on a wild and scenic river. So there's quite a few limitations of what we can accomplish out there. But the pathway is a conversion of what is the path that's out there right now, which is an old horse path or an old walking path. And we're looking at having that being a compacted aggregate pathway that would circle the owner's section of McCallum and provide a great opportunity to just kind of escape some of the craziness that we see here in Sunriver.
And I'll just add to that real quick. I think Mark hit the nail on the head. There have been incremental improvements that are making that more usable for all the owners. And there are plans for the pathway and an additional pavilion and permanent restrooms instead of the porta potties that have been out there that I think folks will be happy.
It's kind of funny that you bring that up because I remember when I first interviewed for the job here in Sunriver 12, 13 years ago, and there were porta potties all over the place. And we're starting to address those. And McCallum was one of those places that when you think about a Sunriver quality and really an owner type experience that we really, that's one area where we're definitely not hitting the mark. So, yep.
And so I guess, again, I'm just going to keep relating this back to the introduction when we talked about, the IAMP priorities as determined by the owner surveys. Here's one where that was identified. We've moved forward on, our board is authorized moving forward on. So you'll see those construction activities. Some were last year, some are this year. And again, so that McCallum will probably be included in the Parks Master Plan, but not for any real immediate needs because we're taking care of a lot of those this year.
Correct.
So sticking with Mark, run to the pathways.
All right, let's throw that slide up.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, pathway master plan. So this was really an update this past year and that we're just kind of finishing up. We've had information that went out to all the owners. It's been in the scene. It's been on our website asking for comment. One great thing about our pathway system is it was built with some real foresight in mind, and also some planning has been dedicated to this over a period of time. But I should probably start with a little bit of the beginning part, and that is when it was originally developed, it was for golf carts to move around Sunriver, and then as Sunriver expanded, it became more of a bicycle pedestrian way to experience Sunriver and to be able to move within it. This is an updated plan, but not a completely new plan. There's a few elements that have always been a challenge for us within Sunriver, and they always pop up. There's a 2 to 3 missing link connection on our pathway system. And then also out at Meadow, and that was the first place where I mentioned the golf carts when they first developed that. It really doesn't follow the roadways. It kind of goes behind the roadways. So it's broke up into a couple of categories. Really, safety, access, and recreation are the main areas there. And if you get a chance to take a look at this, please do online. And if you have any additional comments, forward them. It's not too late. The board is looking to adopt this plan either next meeting or the one following. And we'll have some updates as far as just graphical representation, but the plan is pretty solid as is. Tunnels definitely fall right in with our pathway program. So everybody's familiar with our old corrugated type tunnels. Just as a public works, I could kind of give you a little bit of our background of what we have with it. Most of them flood, especially in this kind of situation. Snow melts, floods, water gets in the bottom, turns to ice. We actually have our guys go out there with jackhammers, jackhammer out all the ice, move it all out of there. It's probably one of the most antiquated parts besides the public works yard that's left over at Sunriver. So the board has made a decision to continue to upgrade the tunnels as we go. The first one was there at Circle 4. Then when we did the new circle, we put one in there, and you can kind of see that process, the ones that are listed below. There's some new ones that are added possibilities, but continue to be evaluated. We worked with an engineering firm to do a strong look at this. And also the design that we currently have really seems to fit what our needs are. Right now, the next one that we have coming up is Fort Rock, and that's should be taking place and completed by mid-June of this year. One of the challenges we have is when we're constructing, moving traffic around, how is that going to work? And then also the utilities and then the drainage that's associated with it. But that's our current tunnel. Some of them will be going away that don't make sense. The example on that might be Cardinal Landing. We have one that goes above, one that goes beneath. The additional expenditure of $500,000 to $800,000 to add one where we already have something that's functioning adequately might be where we can save some money and look at possibly adding a new pathway if that's a design, or a new tunnel if that is a desire in the future. But that's where we're at with the tunnel plan. Restrooms on pathways. So right here, this was part of back with the IAMP, but it always has been kind of a concern. When you see those red, those are not first aid stations. Those are actually the proposed bathrooms of where they're at, and they're tied to that regional park concept. And we've gone through a couple of parks and amenities planning processes in the past. And the new one, we'll see if it flushes out the same information, especially with the owner changes that we've seen. But the regional parks kind of solve some of that bathroom need on the pathway. And so we have two that are really proposed, and those are more in those regional parks. One would be kind of more by the North Store, and the other one would be off of Meadow Road, and those will be part of a larger feature. We have added some new bathrooms that are the members pool. There's 2 bathrooms that support the pathway system, And then we have one that is proposed that we're looking at building this year out at Mary McCallum. But pathways within Sunriver is always one of those elements that come up. And I can tell you there's needs that sometimes they seem a little bit more urgent than others.
Okay, I really have to get some humor in here, as I appreciated that you were talking about needs urgent than others and
Yes.
flushing it out as you were talking about the
Yes.
restrooms here.
So Public Works Campus, so this is a conceptual plan of the Public Works Campus, and this was a first rendition. I anticipate that we'll be having additional renditions. The board has put some money aside for the planning of that this year and actual construction of some elements next year. You'll see the two buildings in the white there. Those are ones that are currently there. And then also in the brown one, the bottom left is cinder storage that actually was completed this last year also. So those three elements will be in place. Kind of the wild card here was the recycling. We're still pretty confined to the area that we're at. If the recycling does move or change, allow us some opportunity to grow here a bit. But in the right now, where the majority of staff works at, reports to work, is an old sewage separation plant. It's a round building, and it is probably, when you talk about pride and performance and being someplace that really feels that you can accomplish the work in the most strategic way possible, and then also being supported, the facilities that we currently have for the majority of our staff don't support either one of those two principles. We're looking at, again, this is probably a multi-year process. The big brown building that's just to the right of the white building there is the one we're looking at this next year. It may change. I think we're going to be taking some different looks at maybe combining these two areas. We have some storage that's currently falling down that we're taking a look at. But another challenge that I could give you is, let's say it's snowing, we're dealing with trying to change implements, and you're trying to get a piece of equipment out that is currently buried in 4 feet of snow. And then that might take an hour or two when we could be out there really affecting what we're supposed to be doing and making sure the roads are safe for the emergency access and also for the users. So again, this year, we're looking at developing this concept, bringing it to a bid ready type plan set, and then building one section of it in 2023. And then also some of the other elements that would support, like the administration buildings, some storage for the aquatics facilities and stuff. That would be probably 2 to 3 years later.
Good segue. You were talking about recycling, so.
Sure. We designed the time frame to allow plenty of time for questions to come in. Basically a 45 minute kind of thing. So I'll adjust here a little bit. Instead of talking about specific historical dates, talk more about, and briefly, about what the current situation is. During the task force deliberations and the board's deliberations, one thing that emerged that is quite positive is the potential around side yard recycling. As it was discussed with the county and the trash hauler and other members of the task force, it was always based upon a discussion of subscription only. You purchase what you want to contract for from the trash hauler, which is very popular and makes sense for a lot of people if they're willing to pay for it, if they can accommodate it, things of that nature within the existing structure of their home. We know that the vote failed in August. Didn't reach the super majority threshold of 60% as required. But here is the current situation. Currently, the county staff submitted a report to the board, to the commissioners, county commissioners. On the 7th, there was a public hearing with the commissioners with an opportunity for public testimony, which included many Sunriver homeowners. There's a written deadline for additional submission to the county commissioners before they make a determination, and that deadline is Valentine's Day at midnight. I put that the wrong way, at midnight of the 14th.
Yes.
And all of you, all homeowners are encouraged to consider your situation, what works for you, specifically around the issue of subscription versus universal service. Subscription, you purchase what you want from the menu. Universal, everybody pays for the same thing, whether they use it or not, and makes sense for them financially. Does that bring us kind of up to speed on that?
I think it does.
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing I was going to say is, and the county commissioners on that, that's the big issue is they're going to, the Cascade Disposal is going to provide side yard, but how is it paid for? And the county commissioners are slated to make a decision on February 28th. So we will know at that time, but either way, I think they said, I think it was 4 to 6 months, thereabouts. So it'd be toward the end of the summer before they would roll out the side yard service.
And the surprise for some folks, including I think the board, was it has switched from what was always discussed, subscription services, to a recommendation from county staff for universal services.
And I'll just, again, I mean, that issue is kind of, can be confusing. It was confusing, I think, to the county commissioners as well. But again, just to clarify, is if you're an existing Cascade Disposal trash customer, subscription service would mean you could choose to have side yard recycling at an additional fee. That would be your choice. Universal would be, if you're an existing customer, you would be charged for recycling. It would be added to your existing fee, whether or not you wanted or utilized the recycling that was now available. So that's key. That's very key. And that's the big issue that the commissioners are making their decision. So let's see, we're 50 minutes into it, and that, I think we addressed all the issues. So we open it up for question.
Are you guys ready for some questions?
There.
Okay, so why would we want to own the telecommunications when we tried this with the water service and we have since turned it over to utility experts?
We had the option.
Anybody want to address that?
Yeah, I can. James, you can chime in too, but I'll start off. And the big advantage of owning your own telecommunication network is that you're not restricted as a captive to a captive supplier. And so you have a lot more control over who are the service providers that are going to be serving your community, what kind of services are they going to be providing, what are kind of reasonable charges versus what they want to charge you, and things of that nature. So there's a lot of advantages in owning a network. We're not going to manage it. Again, if we build a network in Sunriver, we're not going to manage it. We will have professionals manage it, but it will be a Sunriver owner's asset. James, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not.
If you think about it, where you have multiple, if we own the system, the infrastructure, the hardware, and you have multiple providers that are using our infrastructure, and as an owner, you can choose from 1, 2, or 3 different providers. There's competition, and competition typically drives down price. So theoretically, if you're an owner and you don't like the price or you don't like the service, you could switch to a new provider that would be utilizing our system. And so again, when you think about, just the free market where you have multiple options, you have more control over price and service. So that's one of the key elements.
Right.
I think one other quick point here is that, a lot of utility services like, electrical and water are kind of regulated by a public utilities commission. Telecommunications is not a regulated service. And so because of that, it tends to be that if you have a proprietary supplier, it's this is what you get, and if you don't like it, sorry.
Mhm. And could you just clarify again, what is the plan for how we get to choose where we go with telecommunications in the future?
So what's going to happen is the telecommunication task force is, after we get back our survey results, we will make a recommendation to the board of directors. And that recommendation most likely will be, here are the two best solutions or all three solutions that we think the board should consider. The board has the option of doing whatever they want at that point in time. And they can actually say, okay, we'll make a decision right now, or we're going to send it to the owners for a vote. Now, if there is if it does involve, spending significant amount of money, such as build our own fiber to the home network, that does necessarily have to be approved by the owners before the board could go ahead with that. And so, but should the board, as an example, should the board after looking at, after getting the recommendation from the task force and looking at the options, the board says, I think option A with Ben Broadband is the best solution for Sunriver owners, that would not necessarily have to go to a vote. But I don't think the board would do that unless our survey results come back with a high percentage of people saying that's the option I really like.
All right, there's another internet question I would like you to address. This is from an SROA owner. My concern with owning the network is that what's that word? Obsolescence over time. What is the plan in case technology allows future upgrades and example to form of Wi-Fi that works in a treed environment?
Okay. I think I have the gist of the question. So,
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned in my presentation, it cost about $20 million to build our own network. The vast majority of those funds, over 3/4 of that amount of money, is to dig trenches and put conduit in the ground. After the trenches are dug and the conduit's in the ground, the conduit's going to be in the ground forever. So that's kind of a built-in infrastructure. Now, in terms of obsolescence, first of all, fiber to the home has the capability of providing each home with 100 gigabits per second of internet service. Most of us don't even have 1 gigabit of service today. Most of us have maybe 100 megabits. So this is like 1,000 times more bandwidth than what we currently have today. Fiber itself is a piece of glass, and as a piece of glass, it will last in the ground for at least 50 years. And if anything should happen to that fiber, you just yank it out of the conduit and you push in a new piece of fiber. And so once the conduit is there, you have access to every home through that conduit with the existing fiber, or if you put in a new fiber. The actual way in which these networks are upgraded is typically not by replacing the fiber, but by replacing the electrical units at each end of the fiber. So there'll be an electrical unit on your side of your house, and there'll be an electrical unit back in what's called the central office. And by replacing those units, then you get higher bandwidth capabilities on the fiber. But the fiber itself is more than capable of handling 100 gigabits per person, 100 gigabits per second for each individual home in Sunriver, which, even under the most optimistic scenarios, we will not need that capability even over the next 50 years.
You did some recent information Zoom talks about the infrastructure with the internet. Is that information available on YouTube?
Yes, well, that information, if you go to the sunriverowners.org website and you go to the telecommunications page, there are recordings of those sessions on that page. And so you can click on them and then they will play directly.
Okay, so people might find further answers to their questions if they go and watch some of those presentations.
Correct. You'll get a very good, Ben Broadband participated in all 3 of the town hall sessions that we had. And so you'll hear from Ben Broadband. Plus, we had 3 different organizations that have been involved in community-owned networks give their perspective. So you get a clear understanding of what a community-owned network is and what the advantages of that are.
Great. It's good to know what further resources we have to find the answers to some of our questions that are
Correct.
as owners. All right, I'm going to move on to parks. There wasn't there once a chosen place for a dog park near the marina, and what's happened with that plan? No, I see it. I see a head shake. No, head wobble.
Was some plans where we had an architectural firm that basically came up with whatever could be in Sunriver, but it was mostly possibilities and not ideas that were fully vetted. But that was one of the lists and the possibilities, but not for consideration without further input from the board and the community.
Okay, and is that better than putting it in, say, in Mary McCallum, where we could have guests use it, where in Mary McCallum, we're looking at an owner's park?
This is something that to the whole parks master plan. This will be one of the elements that we vet and get a little bit clearer definition along with input from the community.
If a participant today or a homeowner today is interested in being a part of a committee on the parks master plan, what action should they take?
What we'll do is when we get closer to creating that task force, between now and then, we have to come up with a scope of work. We'll put together a request for proposal. We'll see what consultants respond to that. We'll work with choosing a consultant. And then at that time, we will solicit. When I say solicit, we will probably send out an email blast. We will announce it at our board meetings. We'll have it on our webpage that we are looking for those people interested in the Parks Master Plan and being on the task force. So we're not quite at that point yet, but I would also say in the interim, you can send me an email. I will put those over into a file of interested folks and we will make sure that you're contacted specifically. But I will point out, if we get 100 participants that want to be on the task force, that can't happen, because that becomes unwieldy and nothing will get done at that point. But again, I say that even if you're not on the task force, there's going to be multiple opportunities to comment on this plan.
Could I, having been on several task forces and working groups and serving as liaison to different things, this is just an opinion from one of 9 board members. But I don't think there's a checklist of boxes you need to check off to be appropriate for any given task force. I think we're probably wanting to have a balance of experience, knowledge, and skills and interests. Coming to a task force, you need to be a good communicator, but also a good listener. Full of thinking skills. Realizing that you may be a working member, not just someone who shows up every meeting and says what somebody else ought to do, because a lot of volunteer time goes into these task forces. You have to be able to not get stuck on your own thing. Like, I'm here, I want to be on the grand jury because I'm mad at the court for how they mediated divorce. That you need to let go of some things and listen to what other people have to say. I mentioned earlier an example of I may have something that could be a very valued thing for our community, but land use won't allow that to occur. So
this makes me think of when they built the North Pool. There was a owners task force. Is that the similar kind of thing we're looking at for the parks?
It is, and similar to the Telecommunications Task Force, the IAMP task force that Bill participated in. Right now, we are in the process of updating, kind of rewriting our design manual, our architectural design manual, and we have a task force for that, again, comprised of owners, resident owners, absentee owners, design committee members, architects, builders, realtors. It's a very broad group. That's ultimately what we're going to be looking for, is that we have as many different voices bringing different perspectives.
Right.
Well, there's another example, Glenn. as a task force member, being able to hear all points of view, one of the interesting things that I've noticed just in conversations with homeowners is some people seem to think, for the dog park, for example, that dog owners are a monolithic group and everybody wants the same thing. And I'm finding out more and more, hearing comments like, just don't mess up what we've got. Yeah,
My dog can't hear you right now, so that's okay.
Enough said.
Right, understood. But I just, as people talk about, oh, I'd love to work on that parks thing, knowing that they can email James and let them know. And it's not a committee yet. It's not a task force yet, but it's something coming as people look at where they can put their commitments. If they have volunteer time, it's good to know it's an option for our community. So that's good to know. Okay, I'm going to move on to the recycling questions. Everybody breathe. If we go to a side yard recycling system that is basically everybody is involved in side yard recycling, what happens to what we have right now?
I'll jump in.
Sure.
Well, we've been posed this question, and again, without rehashing what happened this past year, where we went to a vote to consider constructing a new facility, and as Bill mentioned, it didn't reach the majority that we needed. And then in the last month's scene, there was an article after the holidays where you can see our existing facility. At the busy times, and I really want to point out, it's really at the busy times of the year that it's overrun with the amount of materials, and some people will leave trash and not just recyclables. We had Christmas trees, etc. But ultimately, another reason is with all of the home shopping that people are doing, the amount of cardboard that we get is phenomenal from all the deliveries. What we need to see is what the impact of the side yard recycling has on this existing facility, meaning will the volume go down? Will the volume of materials go down? And so that's going to take a period of time. Like I said, I think County Cascade said 4 to 6 months, thereabouts, midsummer, when they would roll out the side yard recycling program. We're going to have to see how that volume drops. And if it drops significantly, this existing facility might be good for a while. If it is still overrun, we're going to have that discussion with our board and look at the next option. But ultimately, we're at a point, and Mark Smith was talking about the improvements at our public works campus. That is right at a location where you're mixing the public, large dump trucks and equipment. It's just not a safe situation anymore either. So again, in the interim, I guess to answer your question, the interim over the next year, probably nothing. Until we see the impact of the side yard recycling. And then at that point, we'll start formulating ideas of what to do next.
Right.
And,
Oh, go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
that issue of side yard, I don't think anybody disagrees that side yard recycling is a good deal, but is it good for every single homeowner? And that's the universal versus subscription. Do you have room in your trash enclosure for another 32-gallon can for recycling? What's it going to cost for any homeowner if they even can accommodate, because some enclosures are built into the side of a house and there's no room to build unless you move your HVAC or something like that. So if we look at our home ownership being estimated to be 20% full-time, 40% second home, and 40% rentals, I think everybody needs to look at it from their own perspective of what is going to make sense for them. And again, there's opportunity for public written input until the 14th, through the 14th of February.
And one of the ongoing issues with the recycling has been people outside of the Sunriver perimeter in the Water Wonderland and the Deschutes River area come in to recycle, It looks like the county is looking at also mandating them to side yard, that they're not restricting it to just Sunriver, but literally the county. Is that correct?
There are two things. One, I'll address them separately. With regard to our facility being open to the public, it's been open to the public since its inception over 20 years ago. And it's open by virtue of being open to the public. Deschutes County pays Cascade Disposal to the tune of $40,000 a year to provide service, meaning come and empty the bins. So they're paying for that service on the basis that it serves a larger area than just Sunriver. Now, the question has been asked, again, what is the volume of material that comes from outside Sunriver, and not just in the Three Rivers area, but also Caldera and Crosswater. What is that volume? We don't know what that volume is, and the county and Cascade don't know what that volume is. But again, getting to the second part of the question, the county is considering, as part of this proposal, we're talking about Sunriver and the decisions the county commissioners are making there, but they're also looking to provide curbside or street side recycling for the area, the rural area outside of Sunriver, our boundaries. So again, the thought is that would have an impact reduction in volume at our facility as well. So yes, the county's considering that. We paid attention to it, but not a lot of attention to it. Again, I think providing side yard inside Sunriver and in the adjacent area, I'm back to looking at it for about a year and seeing what the reduction in volume is. What's that impact?
So
The other question, oh, go ahead, Bill.
if I could add, Gwen, so it's open to the public
Mhm.
in the county, but also open to the public in South County, inside of Lapine, as well as the transfer station halfway between Lapine. So it's not, again, we can't put a number on it, but it's not as though everybody in South County is coming to our public facility.
Okay, so another recycling question is, will the side yard recycling plan address or include yard waste, garden waste?
Sunriver, the county, at their last two meetings, it will not include yard waste in Sunriver.
But we do have a yard waste plan, if I'm not wrong. Is there 1 or 2 times a year that we can set things out and it's picked up?
Well, it's always a gray area. We try to pick up as much as possible for fire danger, but what we looked at to collect, our public works department collects, are those things that are linked to ladder fuel reduction. So if you're limbing up your trees to 8 feet, you're removing, dead trees, bitter brush on your property. We do collect those things. But if you're raking up leaves and you're raking up, pine needles that fall every year, those are the types of things, and you put them out that we don't collect. That's the yard debris that folks have to find something to do with.
That's just a comment. Okay. And how or when can people take yard debris out to the area off Cottonwood by the water reservoir? Isn't there a time of year people can take their own yard debris out?
Usually, and you should check the Deschutes County webpage and go to the solid waste section of the webpage. They have their fire-free weeks, usually in early May, and they will advertise where the drop sites are and what the times and days are.
Yeah, that's another question. All right. Well, you guys have done a good job answering some tough questions from our homeowners. I don't see any new questions coming through. There's some commentary, but the commentary is saved for my eyes. And anybody writing commentary is welcome to write a letter to the editor for the scene. Other than that, we thank you so much for doing these town halls for our community, and your time in sharing information is invaluable. So thank you very much. Other than that, I wish you all a beautiful day in Sunriver tomorrow as the weather's getting better. And you can see this repeated on the YouTube channel, Sunriver U. Subscribe. The more subscribers we have, the better it is for us. And we appreciate everybody's participation. So thank you very much. And with that, we're going to sign off for the night.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.